Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Hayoti. I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations. At, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for the Alumni Career Development Webinar series featuring Carmela Bennett. The webinar series covers a range of career topics and includes speakers from a variety of backgrounds. The series is co-sponsored by the TC Office of Career Education and Professional Development and the Office of Alumni Relations. Videos of past webinars are available on our website at www.tc.edu/alumni/career-webinars. Today, alumna Carmela Bennett will present Embodied Leadership, Building the Capacity for Mindfulness in Action. Carmela Bennett has worked in the field of human development, education, and training for over 2 decades. A certified executive leadership and somatic coach, Carmela holds a doctorate degree in leadership from Teachers College, Columbia University, and a master's in counseling psychology. As a certified executive and somatic coach, Dr. Bennett now integrates her experience, research, and belief in human potential to maintain a successful executive coach and consulting practice, designing and delivering holistic, individualized programs for individual leaders and within for-profit and nonprofit organizations and universities seeking to transform their professional and personal leadership. She is currently on the faculty of Teachers College, where she teaches embodied leadership, a body-mind approach, integrating neuroscience, somatic cognitive psychology, and leadership best practices into a radically different way of learning to lead. And I'll give the word now to Carmela Bennett.
Hello. This is Carmela, and I'd like to let you know that you just had an embodied experience. So what do I mean by that, and what made that little moment somatic? So when I rang the bell, I'm guessing that I'm not guessing, I know all of you had a response, a reaction. So in a split second, in less than a second, your entire system, your body reacted. There was a sensation that happened in your body. Maybe some of you recognized it or not. It could have been a little zing or a little quiver or a jolt or something. You heard the chime. There was some sensation in your body. And whether you were conscious of it or not, there was some feeling or emotion that was connected with that sensation. It could have been surprise. It could have been annoyance, like, what's that? That's not what I was expecting. It could have been, ooh, that's a nice noise, a nice sound. And also in connection with that, you had some thought that crossed your mind, something like, gee, I wonder what that's about, or I thought she was going to start talking, or something that you were thinking. And there was also an action that you took, whether you're all aware of it or not. So even though you're on your computer, you may have sat up a little straighter, or looked at the screen, or did something. When I'm doing this in front of an audience, there's always a collective looking towards me. So actually, I even sensed you kind of coming together in that moment and looking towards me, even though you can't see me. So what's important about this, and what makes it somatic, is that it really exemplifies that we're a system. And so when we're talking about somatics, what we're really referring to and accessing is our whole body as a system, a mind, body, spirit system. I add the spirit intentionally because we love to separate the parts of us in this culture, and especially, but we're not separate, even though we know that our mind and body are connected, but somehow we often try to act as if they're not connected. So tonight, I really want to draw your attention to how that all works within us and what's important about that, and how we can use that, how can we leverage that to build leadership, whether it's your professional leadership, it could be something that you really want to shift in your workplace or professional role, or it also could be just in your personal leadership. So I want to broaden the definition as well of leadership as not just a role, but it's something that we're doing every day. So we're leading our lives, we're leading families, maybe we're leading a team, but the concept of leadership as it's not just something that we do and then we stop doing. This really connects to that, the concept of us as a system. It's actually a neurological fact as well, but that we're a system, that we're all working together, and we're thinking, we're feeling, and we also have a purpose. So we're going to be exploring these three dimensions in the next 45 minutes and how they do operate within us, how we can leverage those, and to bring forward something that would be important to you. So another key concept here is that we like to think of our brain, right, as just being located in our head. It also really connects to our overvaluing of cognition. So we like to believe that we are what we're thinking. And what we lack, what we don't concentrate on, is that our entire nervous system is actually our brain. So this picture here gives you a visual of this is the system that we are, this that we connected to when I rang the bell, is operating all the time, 24/7. So the information is coming from our body into our brain, and then our brain is also processing that. We're thinking, but we often forget about the information that is taking place in the rest of our body from the neck down. So when we think about embodiment, we're really paying attention to what's that percentage of information that's nonverbal. It's out of our cognitive awareness, and how do we access that? So I find that really conceptualizing and visualizing our entire body as our brain is really helpful to do this. There's actually some statistics that show that there's as much or many or more neural pathways that are come from our body up into our brain as from our brain down into our body. So if you think about that, what it tells us is that there's a lot of information that's being taken in by our body, by our body's experience in the world. And it's coming in and it's nonverbal. Some statistics say 75 to perhaps 90% of the information that we take in is nonverbal. So it's out of our cognitive awareness. But it's coming in, and that's what's that's influencing the way we think. So we can also consider that we don't think unless we feel. So this picture here is actually a professor, he's Antonio Damasio, and he's done a lot of research around this, these ideas that thinking and feeling are always connected, even though we believe that they're somehow separate. But as you experienced with the bell, if you can think about that little experience, that our feelings actually influence what we're thinking in any particular moment. Yeah, we can also go the other way, and we can think about something and then we start to feel a certain way. But unconsciously and all the time, our sensations and our emotions are impacting how we feel, how we think, and that's impacting how we act. So what's important about this, whoops, I went the wrong way, is when we consider embodiment, we're bringing attention to our internal experience. It's the awareness of our internal experience, which in the rush of our days, we don't pay attention to because so much of our attention is focused out. It's outside of us. And what we lose sight of then is that there's so much going on internally that can give us information about how we act and the behaviors that we're doing. With leadership, that's everything. That's so important. So the sensations to emotions, which give rise to our thoughts and give rise to our actions, is a really helpful way to visualize this to ourselves. That if we pay attention, if we're able to kind of go inside and notice what's going on internally in our body, we can get a lot of information about what's going on with this. So in terms of leadership, it's really important that if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going. So a leadership skill is in order to be intentional about our leadership, to make good decisions, clear decisions, to be able to resolve conflict, all those really important skills, we need to know where we are so that we align with the intention and the outcome that we want to manifest. So another way we can think of that is that when we want to change something, in other words, if we want to shift something and do something differently, we can't think our way into a change. I want you to take that in for a minute. Just how many times have you actually tried to make a change and you've identified it and you say, you know what, the next time I go into that meeting, I'm not going to lose my temper. I know I can do it. And then you walk into that meeting and the same triggers happen and bang, the same thing happens. I'm sure many of you are nodding your head, even though I can't see you. So we can't think our way into a change. And from that embodied perspective, what we've been talking about is that there's so much unconsciously happening within our body, that if our body isn't aligned, if our body isn't able to take a certain action at a particular time, then we can't make that change. So hold that. I would like you to hold that too as we kind of move through some of the ideas, and also we're going to do a couple of practices tonight. So I'm going to take a pause here and tell you a little bit about me and how I got to do what I'm doing. And this is a picture of me when I was about 4 or 5. When I was a young child, when I was really small, I was incredibly shy. I was so shy, and maybe you can see a little bit of that shy child in this picture, that it was really difficult for me to even speak, especially to adults. I would get so embarrassed and I would just get overwhelmed. I remember my face would get red and I would literally feel like I wanted to shrink and get small. So it was painful. It was very painful. In a somatic sense, I literally, I wanted to be small, and I felt small inside. So one day that changed for me when my parents took me to a production of The Nutcracker at Christmas time. And I think I was about 7 when they took me. And what I remember is I saw in front of me this beautiful production and life and movement and music. And if you can imagine that where you are, it was so compelling to me because I could feel something different. And I remember I didn't have words for it, but I wanted to be what I saw. I wanted to, the expansiveness that I saw in front of me, the aliveness, the life. And so I asked my parents if I could take dance lessons, ballet lessons, and they let me take ballet lessons. And what I remember is that when I would go to dance class, I actually was bigger. I didn't have words for that at the time, but actually I could feel myself. And I remember this, that I felt different, and I was more talkative, and the movement made me feel like a bigger person. And I loved that feeling. The problem was that when I walked out of dance class, I went back into the same environment that I was in, and my shape got small again. So at school, I was the shy student that didn't speak up very much. At home, I was also pretty quiet, and I sort of wanted to stay away from anything that was conflict or anything that felt difficult. So I was small. Anyway, fast forward, what remained with me as I continued to take dance classes, though, was the feeling, the belief that, you know what, if I could feel differently and actually be differently in a dance class, what would it be like if I could do that somewhere else? If I could be bigger, if I could be that expansive, open, alive person when I wasn't in dance class. So the trouble was, I didn't really have words for that. I also didn't have a structure or a way to actually take those steps outside of class. So one way we can also think about embodiment is the shape that we're in. So shaping, if we consider that, shaping happens all around us. So small is actually a shape, and I felt small. And actually, this picture, I was a little child, but I also internally felt small. We become our embodiment. It starts to be shaped from when we're a child in all different kinds of ways. So we get shaped by the way we learn into, is it okay to speak up? So in other words, can you be bigger and speak up, or no? Do you have to be small like I was and contract in? We get shaped in the ways that we learn into how do we act in the world? How do we speak up or not? What do we believe? What do we like? What's it like to be in relationships? Do we engage in relationships in an open way, or do we hold back? So these shaping experiences that we have as all throughout our lives impact our internal sense of ourselves, which shows up in our external body. So one way that we can think of this is that our body actually becomes a direct reflection of our internal experience. So for me, my internal experience of being small actually was also reflected in my small shape, the way I didn't speak up, and they became self-reinforcing. So how does this connect to leadership? What's important about that? I want you to take a pause, and if you have a piece of paper, I want you to imagine that, think about the best leader that you ever worked with or for, or somebody out in the world, a public figure, and just bring that person to mind. So take about maybe 10 seconds. Bring that person to mind. So now that you have that person in mind, what was it about that person that made you believe that they were a really good leader? Since I can't get your answers, but I can imagine what some of them are. So some of the feedback that I get when I ask this question is, oh, they were trustworthy. oh, you know what? I really thought this person was a good leader because he or she was confident. They were a really good leader because they were accessible. They were a good listener. They actually helped me to do what I needed to do better. They helped develop me. They were kind. They were compassionate. Those types of things. And I'm guessing that some of you had some of those concepts, those ideas as well. So now I want you to do the reverse. And I would like you to think about who's the example of a leader that you thought was not really such a good leader. So bring that person to mind. Okay, so some of the attributes I'm guessing that you might have come up with that they were not a good leader because they were not kind. They were abrupt. They were not accessible. They were not a good leader. Maybe they were dishonest. They weren't trustworthy. Maybe they were not responsible. They didn't listen well. They didn't work as a team. They were not collaborative. Things like that. So what's important about bringing this to mind? The importance is that if you look down the list, if you made lists, or if you go thinking about what I just brought up, is that none of the attributes that you probably considered had anything to do with them as being really good at whatever particular technology or field they were in. So it wasn't about the content. It wasn't about, wow, they were the greatest mathematician ever, or they were a fantastic technology person. It was the person that they were. So the connection with leadership and embodiment is that we're building capacities and competencies. It's not about content and skill sets. This is, excuse me, what one of the ways that we distinguish leadership, or I make a distinction with leadership and management, is that what we can build from an embodied perspective is we can actually build the capacities that enable us to create the outcomes that we want. So, but we need to connect the internal capacities with our external actions, and there's where we get authenticity and sustainable leadership. So these are a lot of words, right? I know you're saying, okay, I get the ideas, but okay, what do you actually mean? So I'd like you to do a little practice, and so we can connect what we've been talking about and how this actually works out in the real world, how this actually connects to action and the person that we become and the leader that we can become. So I'm assuming a lot of you are sitting, and it doesn't matter if you're standing. So just move to the edge of your chair if you're sitting. And I'd like you to just let your head droop and your shoulders droop, and look at the floor and really sense into this slump. Really sense into this. And from here, I would keep your eyes open. So from here, with your focus really on the floor, your shoulders rounded, what do you sense? What feelings or sensations start to come up for you? What emotions might you be sensing? If we could speak to each other, I'm guessing that some of you might say, this feels gloomy, or this feels unmotivating, or this feels sad, or this feels like defeat. Things like that. So just notice that. How taking this shape, as it were, really impacts your how you're starting to feel. And now I want you to think about, okay, if you're in this shape, from this shape or this presence, if you had to make a really difficult decision, what would that be like? Would it be, how might that decision be made? And would it be a clear decision? Where would it be coming from? What would you be focusing on or not from the shape? If you had to engage in a conflict or in a difficult conversation from this shape, what would that be like? If it was really difficult, how effective would you be or not? How engaged would you be if it was a conversation? How engaged or not would you be with the person? If your intention was to resolve the conflict, how might that be impacted by being in this shape? How might they sense into you if this were the shape that you were in? What type of leader would they sense you to be from this shape? Okay. So I'm guessing you're getting this. So in other words, from this shape, there's a lot of limitations from this shape in every one of those actions that you'd be taking. So shake that out a little bit. And now what I'd like you to do, so with your feet on the floor, is just to take your arms up over your head and make like a star, like really look up and extend your arms up and feel your chest expand and like a star shape. And feel into this shape. Really feel into this. And again, I ask you to notice what sensation might you feel. And when I speak to sensation, we're talking about some energies. There's a sensation is also an energetic quality, right? So is there an energetic quality here? What mood or emotion starts to come up for you? Not being able to hear you, I'll just throw some out there that people often say. Oh, excited, purposeful, joyful, optimistic, energetic, limitless. These are some of the emotions and the moods that people often reflect from here. So I'm going to ask the same question. So if you had to make a difficult decision from this presence or this quality, what might that decision, how might that take place? How might that happen? If you had to engage in a conversation, what might happen from here? What might the quality of that conversation be like? Just make those connections. And now we're going to take something. So you've noticed that, you know what? Okay, in less than 2 minutes, you shifted your shape, and you actually shifted your competence, your capacities, your abilities to do something differently in less than a minute each time. So your internal capacities were directly impacted what you're able to do externally. let's try something else. So in that same, with your sitting forward in your chair, just really feel your feet on the ground. Feel your feet on the floor. And wiggle your toes if it helps. Really feel your feet on the ground. And now I'd like you to, we're going to take an inhale, and I want you to feel like you're lifting up through your spine, like there's a string coming up from the back of through your spine, all the way up to the top of your head. So feel like you're going to inhale and feel like there's a lift, like you're lifting, not raising your chin, keeping your chin level, but just feeling like there's a string pulling you up as you inhale. And as you exhale, I want you to imagine that this exhale is coming down over the front of your body, and bring to mind somebody or something that you feel good about. Let's do that one more time. We'll put these together. So feet are on the floor. Your hands are resting on your thighs if you're sitting. I'm going to invite you to open your palms so they're facing up. Just notice what's different if you put your palms down on top of your thighs. Now open your palms up. So take that lift. Take that lift on the inhale. Inhale up. Feel that string pulling you up through the top of your head. Exhale and bring something to mind somebody that you feel really good about, or something that you feel good about without losing your lift. And sense into this shape. Feel your chest expand. Your jaw's relaxed. Your eyes are soft. And from this shape, what might it be like to have to make a difficult decision? What might it be like to have to resolve conflict with someone? What might it be like if you needed to brainstorm or be creative? What might it be like if you were working with a team and you all needed to work together? So stay in this shape for another 60 seconds as I talk you through these next few slides. So we can also consider that the body doesn't lie. This is actually a quote from Martha Graham. So that the body is a direct reflection of our internal experience. So when we're feeling expansive and settled internally, our body reflects that. When we talk about shaping, we're talking about the way our experiences, they show up in our musculature, in the patterns of breath that we have, the way our energy moves, our postures and gestures, and our patterns of contraction and expansion, which is what we just experienced. So our body unconsciously takes all these shapes, moves in these different ways, our breath patterns, the postures and the gestures that we take, and we just experienced a few, and I walked you through them. But we're doing these all the time. We have our own individual shapes that consist of different postures, different gestures, the way our energy moves or doesn't move within us. And the other way I want you to consider embodiment as helpful is that what we practice is what we become. So the more we practice, when we practice a certain shape, the body learns it. We have that 300-3,000 rule that we learn through practice and repetition. So if we practice into a certain shape, then we are also practicing into certain moods or emotions that are much more likely to be there for us. And as we just experienced, those moods and emotions connect to thought patterns. They could be cognitive biases that we have. Those thought patterns also connect to the actions that we take or the actions that we don't take. So what we're practicing through our embodied shaping impacts the capacities that we have and whether they support our intentions and our actions. So this is the mind, body, and also the spirit, the why. So I've added the why matters. So when we connect to the actions that connect to our purpose, in other words, from that centered place, we're much more able to connect to what's important to us versus being pulled into what's going on around us, or being pulled into old history, perhaps, the stories that tend to run when we're, in that contracted shape. So we're in a centered, grounded place, we're much more likely to be able to stay connected to what's important to us, to support that expansiveness, openness that you felt from the centering practice. So a question you can ask yourself is what you're practicing supporting your intention, what's important to us. So a way to consider leadership from this perspective is also it's the self that you are, it's a way of being. It's what you're practicing, and it's what you're practicing aligns with what's important to you. So it's not a role. It's not a role that we put on, our coat that we put on, and then we take it off. What we're cultivating with an embodiment is the being that we are, the presence that we're able to hold. And it's not that we don't ever lose that, but how consistently can we be the leader, that open, engaged, connected leader that we felt into when we were centered, that connected with the ability to engage in difficult relationships. Here's the centering practice that we went through, you'll have it. That could connect to have a difficult conversation or resolve conflict, have a generative team meeting, brainstorm, all of those things. So practicing, what we practice is the leader that we are and the leader that we can become. So centered leaders, another way that I orient this toward leadership is how you show up in the world. And when you are able to reflect a presence that's grounded, engaged, inclusive, that's the most effective, most productive, most inclusive leader that we're actually able to manifest. And we can do that through the practices that we engage in or we don't engage in. The next couple slides are some visuals just to give you an added dimension of what we're talking about, why this is important, centered leadership and inclusive leadership. So a lot of you who are working in different organizations have come across these concepts in different ways, but what we're talking about is we're leading from the center. Those of you who are working in networked organizations especially understand what I mean by this. But we can also see that how this is really helpful in just about every area of our life, whether it's in a personal leadership capacity. So when we're leading from the center, not top down, not it's me telling you what to do or me trying to drive you to do something, but we're in this together, and the presence that we hold when we're trying to manifest any action or relationship is from the center. So if you consider this, that presence that you're able to hold from center, the way this also shows up is that mirror neurons actually pick up on the nervous system of other people. So when I have the butterfly effect, it's more powerful than we imagine. It's like these small shifts can have much more impact than we believe, simply by the presence that we're bringing. That if we're open, we're much more likely to manifest openness from someone else. So these small shifts can have a really big impact. And in this interconnected world, we really need to have an ability, a capacity to be inclusive, to include others' ideas, to be able to not only hold our ground, which you were able to do from center, but also listen to the ideas of others, to be able to include other people from diverse cultures, from diverse ways of thinking, that sometimes when we get into those contracted places, it's much more difficult. And then our mindsets can become not inclusive, but exclusive, because we feel disconnected from others. So we're all in this together. So a way that we can think of what's important about centered leadership is we could actually, through our presence, create, manifest the capacity that we're all in this together. Now, what would that be like? Let's think about that. If we're all in this together, we think back to those attributes of the really good leaders: trustworthy, open, accessible, confident. Those are the capacities that we're able to manifest when we're able to manifest a centered present more consistently. I'm noticing that we're running out of time here, and so I'm going to run through really quickly. You'll have these slides. There's neuroscience that backs this up, and what we're working with too when we're talking about somatics is how do we actually leverage our nervous system to help us versus falling into the default patterns that we don't even recognize anymore. So some of you may be familiar with that we have 3 areas of our brain: the neocortex, the limbic system, and the reptilian brain. And so what we're talking about when we fall into our default is under stress, which is when we get uncentered or off-centered, we're much less likely to be able to be open and inclusive, because our limbic system starts to grab. When we get grabbed, we get grabbed into our limbic system. So that fight, flight, freeze, appease, that's when these dynamics start to be manifested. What does fight look like? Fight starts to look like I'm pushing forward. I'm going to move against something. Flight is more of that contraction. So actually, the contraction that we took in the beginning of the session, when we move away from something, we feel small. We can't engage with something. Freeze is when we find ourselves, we can't take an action. So it could show up as confusion or just stuck in place. So these are actually the patterns that our nervous system is taking. And when we start to identify for ourselves which one do we tend to fall in, we can identify, have awareness of, you know what, when I get grabbed, when life grabs us, where is my center going to go? So how am I going to lose my center? Am I going to contract in and get small? Am I going to get so big and push forward that I'm going to try to run people over? Or am I going to freeze in place and I just can't take any action at all? So when life grabs us, it's harder to stay centered. So embodiment can also be really useful to us because it gives us a way to go through our days, to go through the world, and recognize that, you know what, when I'm getting pulled off center by whatever it is, by whatever the trigger is, then I have a way to get back. I have a way to get recentered. So I wanted to show you this slide as well. So here's another way that we can use somatics. We can start to, again, bringing our attention to the life of the body, the internal life. So when life grabs us, things start to happen. Your heart starts to race. We start to perspire. You get butterflies in your stomach. And sometimes our eyes get big and our jaw gets tight. So we call these somatic markers. So these are also, when we start to identify notice what's going on internally with us. We can notice when we're getting grabbed. Whoa. Or notice when we're getting grabbed. I don't know why that's going ahead of me, but we can notice when we're getting grabbed, and we can stop and recenter and get back to that open, engaged, inclusive, connected presence. If we had more time, I would walk you through these slides a little bit more in detail. I'm going to give you this slide. So here's another way that we can imagine those fight, flight, or freeze responses. So when that grab happens and the tightness happens in your stomach, what you might do is you contract, or you move away from what it is that's what feels like a threat. Or you could hyperextend, or you could push forward, or you freeze or become invisible. But our energy and our attention often goes up, and we come out of ourselves. So there's another example of how we become uncentered. So what we did in that centering exercise was actually we shifted into a presence by shifting our embodied system into a presence that was open, present, and able to be more inclusive. We were able to manifest more of those attributes of the effective leaders that you identified at the beginning of the hour. I'm going to take 2 more minutes and just walk us through another set of practices that you can use and to take away that will actually be able to shift you into different actions that you all need to take as leaders and just people in the world, and they're called presence qualities. So in a similar way that we did centering, I'm going to walk you through 4 different presence qualities. This was created by another somatic practitioner, and his name is Stuart Heller. He connected presence qualities to the elements: fire, water, wind, and ground. So I want you to experience, not just hear me talk about, I want you to experience how you can actually also create a shape, shift your shape that creates a presence that naturally, effectively, and directly moves you out of a grab into a way of an action that would create an outcome that you might want to manifest. So let's see how that actually works. So I'd like you to, again, to just move to the edge of your chair and put both feet on the floor. This time, I want you to have your right foot just slightly in front of your left foot. And I'm going to direct you to shifting your center of gravity and some postures and gestures. And I'll just walk you through this. So the first one we're going to take is I want you to take your center of gravity, feel like it's lowering, that it's going down, and I want you to shift your body slightly forward. So your center of gravity is down, and you're leaning slightly forward with your hands on top of your thighs, as you see in the picture. I really want you to feel into this. Really feel pressure on top of your thighs. You're really connected. Your hands are really connecting with the tops of your legs. And say out loud, this is what I want you to do. And feel, does that feel aligned? Does that feel like it's synced? That your presence, your words, and what you want to have happen is actually aligned. So if you were in this presence, would you be able to say, this is what I want you to do? My guess is you're more likely to. Versus if you were just sitting normally and didn't have this posture. So really quickly again, take your center of gravity. So sit with your back in a lift, and then take your center of gravity down and slightly forward. Your hands are on the tops of your thighs, and say out loud, this is what I want you to do. And imagine if this was the intention that you had, if there was something that had to happen with this presence, how might this presence impact the action that you wanted to take, whether it was to direct a group or to take an action yourself? This is what I want you to do. I guess it would be a little bit easier. Let's shift to something else. So stay where you are. I want you to actually take a little bit of a round in your back, like you see in the picture, and move your center of gravity slightly back and down this time. Take your hands and now turn your palms over so that they're facing up. So a little bit of a round in your spine. Feet are still on the floor. Eyes are open. Palms are up. And now I'd like you to say, tell me your concerns. Does it feel synced? Does it feel aligned? Does it feel possible? So this becomes a listening quality. Tell me your concerns. I'm here to listen. As opposed to what we were doing before, this is what I want you to do. There are times when we all need to listen, and sometimes it's more difficult to do that than others. However, we need to be able to bring out that quality, bring that internal quality within us that can manifest the ability to listen, that capacity. We can use we can resource our body in a way that actually makes that much easier to happen, even when it's difficult. So if you've ever been in a meeting or had somebody say, I really need to talk to you, and you're busy, and it's the last thing you want to do, perhaps, but it's important. You know that it's really important that you take the time to listen. Here's a practice that can actually shift you from, say you were in ground and you're ready to drive forward to, I need to listen now. Okay, tell me your concern. In a way that's authentic. Versus, okay, yep, tell me what, yep, okay, I'm listening, right? This is much more aligned. Your whole body is able to listen. Two more. So now I want you to take a lift like we did in the beginning of the hour, and take your center of gravity up and your arms up and up over your head, and just way up and look up at the ceiling and say out loud, let me think about it. Or you could also say, you know what? I'm going to let that go right on by. How does that feel? What's this quality like? And are there times when, you know what? You need to let it go right on by. It's a real skill to be able to do in moments when we don't really feel like it or we don't really want to. So center of gravity up and open. Let me think about it, or I'm going to let that go right on by. When might this be helpful to you? Last one, fire. So bringing your hands back in front of you. Now I'd like you to just lift your left heel slightly up off the ground, as you see in the picture. Take your center of gravity. This time, it's lifting and forward. Your arms are out in front of you, as you see in the picture. You're leaning forward. Your center of gravity is down and forward this time. Down and forward. Your hands are up like you're ready to shoot them out in front of you. And I'd like you to say out loud, this is what we can do together. Or the other thing that really feels right in this, from this presence is, hey, let's do it. Let's do it. When is there a time when let's do it is exactly what you want to do? And how could you bring a presence that, okay, now it's time to act? So sometimes we can get stuck in any one of those presences. If you could imagine, we're in a meeting sometime, or we're thinking to ourselves, and we're in that, like, tell me your concerns, or I'm thinking, and then, you know what, we need to shift to, okay, let's do it. Sometimes when we have a tendency that we're really comfortable with, like, I really like to hang out in that, like, hey, let me think about it, and I never get to shift to let's do it. Here's a way that you can do that. Here's a way to shift your internal sense, your internal quality, to connect to an action you need to take. So as you can see from these 4 presences these qualities that we just went through really quickly, there's a time and a place when each one of these is really important and really helpful to us, especially as a leader. We need to be able to take all these different actions and manifest these qualities, these capacities that we talked about at different times. So when we resource our body, it connects in very quickly, easily, naturally. We don't have to think about it, to an emotion that syncs with the thinking and the acting that we're trying to manifest. So in the space of one conversation, for example, you might go from, let me think about that, to, I'm going to let that one go right on by, let's do it, or this is what I want you to do. So you can see how actually this would map onto not only, it could be a conversation, it could be manifest over the life of a project or a program, but we need to have all these qualities. I'm guessing that that each one of you in one of these felt like, oh, you know what, this one feels really good. I really like this one. I live in this place a lot. And some of them actually might have felt very unfamiliar or uncomfortable. And there's information. So when something feels uncomfortable to us, there's a reason. So it's our internal read on it is, you know what, I don't like this. And what we don't like to do, what doesn't feel good, we don't tend to live there. So if listening, sometimes I do this with people, and I immediately identify, oh wow, this is what we can do together, or let's do it. I live there. I'm all about let's do it. It's a great quality to have. Sometimes we can overuse it. And that's the muscle, or if you want to think about it that way, that we're constantly in. That's the energy pattern that we're always in. It's the focus that we're always in. It's the quality that we exhibit. It also can be very exhausting. When we overuse any one of these qualities, sometimes we're not balanced. So this is a way to build balance. Also, to be able to move and shift into any of these embodied shapes also gives us a range. It expands our range of emotional patterns. It expands our range of thought patterns, what we're able to think is possible, the ways that we're able to think, if we're able to think with more focus, like in this is what we can do together, or this is what I want you to do, or more creatively, I'm open, I'm just going to think about that, or any one of these different intentions and actions that we're trying to take. This is why I like to refer to embodiment as mindfulness in action. It's because we're taking our awareness, and we're actually able to engage with it and actually take actions that we weren't able to take possibly before, or they were much more difficult, or we weren't able to be strategic with those actions. It was just random. And this is why a lot of times what we're trying to manifest, we struggle with so much, because we know what we want to do. We know what we want to manifest, and the action that we want to take. or the change we want to make, and it's just really difficult because our body, our embodiment, is not aligned yet with that change, that different action, or that different way of feeling or sensing or thinking. Here's a way that we can actually build a different system. And so our neurology or neuroscience tells us that we're able to do this by virtue of that of neuroplasticity. So we can actually rewire, to some extent, what feels comfortable to us by engaging in different practices that right now we may not be engaged in. We talked about a lot in a short amount of time, and I'm very aware that here's the last space, which is similar to center, and from space and center, we could go anywhere. So center also gives us the option to move in any direction that we want to. We can, from here, we can move into fire, we can move into listening. So you can also think of that center as a neutral gear, someplace where you could get to, and then you can move with intention and strategy to a different presence to be able to manifest the action that you want to take. What a beautiful thing, to be able to be intentional, to be able to be mindful, and to put that mindfulness into action. So a question you can ask yourself with these presence qualities and with the center is, what presence quality might you need to embody to be able to fulfill on what's important to you? So if you think back to where we started and some of those attributes or qualities of leadership that you really admire in somebody else, and you thought, you know what, I'd really like to build a little bit more openness or inclusiveness, or I'd like to be able to make decisions more clearly or more decisively. Which one of these presence qualities and practices that we have talked about tonight, that if you engage with them on a regular basis, say 8 times a day, I'll toss out that number, 8 times a day, for a month, would you be able to manifest more easily? And how would that change? How would that change your leadership? And I'm going to go one more. How would that change your life? So this is my, at the end, this is the presence that I've been able to manifest through all the dance classes and the expansiveness and that I learned into long ago, that I felt but was not able to put into action until I brought all of these ideas and practices intentionally into my life. So out of all the questions and the sense that, you know what, I know that you can be different, I was able to, through the different studies that I've engaged with over the years and my doctoral research, really understand and start to put into practice that we can build a different self. And that's what's important, depending on what it is that you want to build. I know we're at time, so I want to open it up to any questions if there's anyone who would like to stay on the line and ask some questions. Here's my information. I welcome anyone to get in touch with me. If you have questions, you can email me directly. I also offer free initial consultations if anybody would like to talk about coaching or leadership development. I'd love to hear from you. So are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Carmela. Let's see if there's any. There's a question. Actually, it's more of a comment received from Lena Trio, who says, as always, it was a pleasure to listen. Professor Bennett, thank you. I appreciate if you can share the slides. So I can tell you, Lena, that you will receive a link with the webinar, which will be shared on YouTube as well. Is there any other questions? I don't see any other questions. Do you have anything else you want to share, Carmela, before we close the webinar? Is there anything else you would like to share?
No, just thank you for having me. And I know this is a lot in a short amount of time, so I'd love to hear from anybody who has questions. And no, thanks so much.
Okay, so I just want to say that thank you again to Carmela. We really do appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise with the TC community. And video, as I mentioned earlier, of this video of this presentation will be available on our website, www.tc.edu/alumni/career webinars. And you can also visit our website for more information about our monthly webinars. The next webinar will be on May 21st at 12 p.m. Eastern Time with Marisol Richmond, who will present tools and resources for the English language learners, job seekers. Again, thank you, Carmela, and thank you all for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.